There is a stone in the great hall of Greenock with the shape of my boot worn into it. The masons have offered twice to lift it and set a fresh one. I will not let them. That is the stone I stood on while they walked Marit Solve out of my hall by the elbow, and I did not move, and I did not speak, and I was the Alpha King of 9 locks and 40,000 wolves. Let me tell it the way it happened, since I have had 4 years to arrange it into something kinder, and it will not go. Greenock is a river kingdom. That means we are a country of gates. 9 stone locks hold the black water back in steps from the high moss down to the sea road, and every barge of grain, salt, oak, and iron that comes to my people comes up through those gates, and every gate is a machine, and every machine is a thing that will kill you the day you stop respecting it. My father learned that. He was under the 4th lock's gate when the counterweight chain let go. I was 19. I got my shoulder under the timber and I held it and I got him out, and he lived 9 more days. And when they finally pried my hands off the beam, my fingers had gone to claws and would not straighten. They straightened in time. They never stopped shaking. You cannot be a king with hands that shake. That is not a law anyone writes down. It is simply a thing that lives in a hall. Men watch the cup. Men watch the pen. My counsel watched my hands for 11 years the way farmers watch a sky, and I learned to keep them under the table, on my knees, in my sleeves, on a hilt, and I made an entire reign out of never being seen to hold anything gently. Marit Solve came up the water in the autumn of my 9th year, on a barge with her grandfather's tool chest and no pack, no rank, no letter from anybody who mattered. I did not send for her. The lock warden did, and only after 4 rights had come and gone and the 6th gate still would not seat. The warden did not tell me he had hired a woman out of a mill valley because he knew what my counsel would say, and he was right, because when they saw her on the 6th lock in a leather apron with her sleeves tied off, my steward said out loud at my elbow, "The warden has bought a wheelwoman." That was what they called her all 2 winters. The wheelwoman, not cruelly. That is what makes it worse. Nobody in Greenock ever wronged Marit Solve. They simply never once considered her, the way you do not consider the crane in the yard, and I let that be the weather she lived in. She got the 6th gate seated in 11 days. I went down to see it because a king goes and looks at things. I came at dusk when the water was the color of a blade and the lamps were being lit along the lock wall, and she was lying on her back on wet stone with her arm up to the shoulder inside the gate housing, and she said, without looking to see who was blocking her light, "Don't stand there." I moved. I have thought about that a great deal since. I had been Alpha King for 9 years. Rooms emptied for me. Wolves twice my age put their eyes on the floor. And a right I had never met told me to get out of her light, and I got out of her light, and something in me, I am going to be careful here, because I have heard other kings tell this, and they all reach for the same words, and the words are lies. Nothing sang. Nothing howled. I did not feel destiny arrive like weather. What happened was that my hands went still. I noticed it at the wall, with the lamp boy going past. I was holding the rail, and the rail was not moving. 11 years, and the tremor had simply stopped, the way a noise you have lived inside stops, and the silence is so loud you look up for it. I told myself it was the cold. She came up out of the housing eventually, wet to the elbow, and looked at me properly for the first time and did not bow, and I saw her decide something and put it away. She had a plain, strong, honest face and grease along her jaw, and gray eyes that took a reading of you the same way they took a reading of a gate. What is this? What does it carry? Where will it fail? She said, "You're the king." I am. Your 6th gate was set 2 fingers proud on the sill. Whoever built it was in a hurry. She wiped her hands on her apron. "It'll hold now. It won't hold forever. Nothing you built in a hurry will." I stood on that lock wall with my steady hands, and I said something clever and useless, and she went back to work, and I walked home through my own hold like a man who has heard his name called in an empty street. That was the 1st winter. I will not pretend I was noble about it. I found reasons. There are always reasons in a country of gates. The 3rd lock's leak, the new hoist, the survey of the moss channels, and every one of those reasons was a road to wherever Marit Solve had her boots planted that day, and I walked all of them, and my counsel thought I had discovered an interest in engineering, and the lock warden, who was not a fool, started leaving a second stool by the brazier. We worked. That is the part nobody will believe. 2 winters, and the tally of what happened between us is this. We drank an unholy amount of bad tea. She taught me the arithmetic of a counterweight and did not once make it easy for me. I told her about my father under the gate, which I had told no living soul, on a night when the sleet came sideways and the brazier smoked, and she did not say a single soft thing to me. She only listened and then said, 19. That's young to learn that a thing can be strong and still let go, and then handed me a wrench because there was a hoist that needed doing and grief keeps, and my hands were steady the whole 2 winters, in the workshop, on the wall, at the brazier, and the moment I climbed back up to my own hall they went, every time, like a lamp carried out of a room. I knew. Say that plainly because everything after depends on it. I knew before the second spring. I'm not a stupid man and I am not an innocent one, and my own body had been telling me in the only language it had over and over for 2 years, and I understood exactly what she was to me and exactly what I was supposed to do about it. What I did about it was nothing, for a long time, and then something much worse. Here is the thing that ate me. Greenock's grain does not grow in Greenock. It comes down the Havren roads out of the flat country, through Durin Havren's toll gates, on Durin Havren's sufferance, and Durin Havren had spent 4 years quietly buying up the wagon lines and the drovers and the 2 passes that were not his. And in my 11th year he had his hand on the throat of every loaf my people would eat that winter, and he came to Greenock to be sweet to me about it. He brought his daughter. Of course he brought his daughter. I want to be fair to Ilse Havren, because she has been called a great many things by people telling this story badly. Ilse Havren was 24, sharp as a chisel, and about as happy to be in my hall as a hawk in a hat box. She was in love with a horse master in her father's own yard and had been for 2 years, and she told me so herself the second evening flatly, over wine, and asked me to please not make her marry me, and I said I had no intention of it. I meant it that night. Then the council got hold of it. Then the steward laid the grain tallies on my table, and the winter numbers, and the number of children in the low quarter, and my warden of the sea road said the word famine out loud in my hall, and Durin Havren sat in my second best chair for 11 days being reasonable, and the shape of the thing came round and round and round to the same door, and behind that door there was a match, and an alliance, and roads that would stay open, and a country that would eat. And they said, my counsel, my steward, my own aunt, they said it kindly, which is how the worst things are always said, take the Havren match. It costs you nothing. You have no mate. You have never had a mate. What are you losing? I had a mate. She was 200 feet below us with her arm inside a gate housing and grease on her jaw. I said nothing. That is the whole confession, and I could stop here. Every man tells you the story of his worst hour as though it were a thing that was done to him. Nothing was done to me. I was a king. I had an army and a treasury and a voice that emptied rooms, and I sat in a chair and let clever men explain to me why the thing I wanted was expensive, and I did not say the one sentence that would have ended the conversation, which was, she is mine, and I am hers, and we will find the bread another way. I did not say it because saying it out loud would have made it true in a hall full of men who counted my hands, and because a holdwright with no pack cannot be Luna of Greenock, and because I was 30 years old and still, somewhere under all that fur and stone, a boy holding up a beam and telling himself that if he only holds hard enough and says nothing, nobody has to die. So on the last night of Durin Havren's visit, I let my steward read the betrothal in open hall. She was there. That is the part that has cost me the most sleep. She should not have been there. She was there because I had ordered the lock plans brought up that evening. I had ordered it myself, 3 days before, with my own mouth, and so she came up out of the yard in her working clothes with a roll of drawings under her arm and stopped just inside the doors because the hall was full and the steward was reading. And I saw her from the dais, 10 feet away, and I watched her hear it. She did not make a sound. Her face did the thing I had watched it do at the 6th gate, took the reading. What is this? What does it carry? Where will it fail? The hall cheered. Durin Havrin embraced me. Ilse Havrin looked at the floor with her jaw set like a woman being fitted for a coffin. And Marit Salve put the drawings down on the end of the long table very carefully, because they were good drawings and she did not have it in her to throw them. And she crossed to the foot of the dais, and my steward moved to head her off, and I lifted 2 fingers and he stopped. And she stood there in front of her king in a leather apron in front of 400 people and asked me one question. She said, "Do you want me to go?" That was all. No claim. No name for what we were. She did not say the word mate. She did not say the word bond. She did not say 2 winters. She did not say your hands. She gave me a door with 2 sides to it, and she stood there and let me pick in front of my whole hall, and there has never in my life been a more merciful thing done to me, and I have never repaid anything so badly. I said, yes. 1 word. I did not even give her a sentence. She nodded once, the way you nod at a reading you have taken and did not like. Then she turned round and walked out through 400 wolves who were already going back to their wine, and Havrin's man took her elbow at the doors, not roughly, he was steering her, the way you steer a barrow out of a doorway, and I stood on my stone, and I felt my hands start to shake before she was even out of the room. She was gone from Greenock inside the hour. She left the drawings. She left the plans for the Moss Channel hoist, finished, which she owed me nothing for. She took her grandfather's tool chest and her coat, and she paid the barge master herself in coin, which he tried to refuse and she made him take, and she did not leave a word for me, and I did not deserve one, and that is the last thing anybody in my kingdom saw of her. Now the ledger of what my cleverness bought. The betrothal lasted 11 weeks. It ended when Ilse Havrin rode out of her father's yard at night with the horsemaster and 2 horses and a great deal of nerve, for which I have never blamed her a single hour. Durin Havrin came to Greenock white with rage, demanding I hunt them, and I looked at him across the table and understood, finally, 11 weeks too late, what I had actually been sold. The roads were never going to stay open. The match was never the price. The match was the hook. Havrin wanted a king in his family so that when the wagon lines closed, the closing would look like weather instead of a hand. He had gambled that I would rather eat any humiliation than be seen to have been fooled, and he had gambled well, because he had watched me in my own hall and correctly judged that I was a man who would not say a hard sentence out loud. He closed the roads anyway that winter, and my people ate anyway, because we opened the moss channels and floated grain in from the coast on a hoist that a wheelwoman had drawn for me and left on my table as a gift, on the night I threw her away. I would like to tell you I bore that well. I sent riders after her within the month. She was gone up country, and the country up there is 100 green valleys with mills in them and no love for kings. I sent more riders. I sent money. I sent, God help me, a proclamation, and my steward went gray trying to talk me out of it and should have tried harder, because what a proclamation does is tell every liar in 6 counties exactly what the king will pay for. So they came. For 4 years they came. A wheelwright's girl in the north with gray eyes. A woman answering the description at a fair in the flat country. A tool chest with the name Salve burned into the lid, offered to me for 40 crowns by a man who had burned it in himself that morning. I rode to 11 of them personally. I sat in 11 kitchens with my hood up and my hands under the table and looked at 11 strangers being kind to me, and rode home. And my steward stopped saying anything at all, and I stopped being able to hold a cup. It got worse every year, the tremor, until my armorer had to build me a grip, and my scribes wrote everything, and I ate alone, because a king who cannot bring a spoon to his mouth in front of his council is a king with a shorter reign than he'd like. My aunt asked me once gently whether I had considered that it might be grief. I told her it was an old injury, which was true, just not the one she meant, 4 years. I want that number to sit there because it is not a romantic number. It is not a lifetime searched. It is not 300 years of noble waiting. It is 4 years of a grown man paying strangers for rumors because he did not have the courage to say one sentence in his own hall, and every single one of those days she was alive somewhere, working, with no idea that I had turned my whole kingdom into a net. Then, in the spring of the 4th year, a sea-road clerk brought me a report I nearly did not read, because it was not about a woman at all. It was about a wolf. There is a valley 3 days up the water called Cardinwell, mills and green, 40 families, wheels turning everywhere you look, the kind of place where the water does the work and the people mostly argue. And in Cardinwell there is a thing they call the wheelwright's hound, a wolf, built life-size out of oak ribs and iron sinew and chain, standing on a stone plinth at the head of the mill road. It was built 60 years ago by an old madman named Osric Solvay, who ran it off the mill race on a drum and a cam, and once a year at the Valley Fair, the hound used to come down off its plinth and walk the mill road end to end, one paw after another, with a sound like a mill and every child in 6 valleys screaming. It had not moved in 19 years. Not since old Solvay died. 4 wrights had tried. The valley had given it up and let the ivy have it. The report said, the hound walked at the spring fair. The right is a woman. She charged a copper a head and made 11 crowns, and the whole valley turned out, and it is said she will walk it again at the summer fair. The clerk was still talking. I could not hear him. I was looking at my own hand flat on the table in front of me, and I want to be exact about this, because it is the only miracle I have ever been given, and I have no intention of dressing it up. My hand was not steady, nothing so tidy. My hand was shaking so hard the paper was moving under it, and I was laughing, out loud, alone, in the middle of my own council chamber, like a man losing his mind. She had a name for what she'd done to that machine. She'd have said, it wasn't dead. Nobody had bothered to find out what it wanted. I did not send a rider. I stood up and I told my steward to have a horse and no crown and no escort at the water gate within the hour, and he opened his mouth, and I said, say the number of days to Cardinwell. He said, 3, sire. Then say nothing else for 3 days, I told him, and went to get my coat, and my hands shook the whole way down the stair, and for the first time in 4 years I did not mind them at all. Cardinwell announces itself before you see it. You hear it. 3 days up the water, and then the barge turns into a green cut in the hills, and there is a sound coming down at you like a hall full of people all clearing their throats at once, 9 mills, 4 races, a fulling stock somewhere hammering wet cloth, and every wheel in the valley turning at a slightly different speed. My horse hated it. I sat there in a farmer's coat with a hood up in my hands and my sleeves and thought, of course this is where she went. She went to the loudest place in the country, and it is loud with machines. I did not go straight to her. I want to be honest about the reason, and the reason is that I was afraid. So I went and looked at the wolf first, like a coward. It stands at the head of the mill road on a stone plinth the size of a cart, and I have seen the treasuries of 3 kingdoms, and I have never in my life seen anything like it. It is a wolf the size of a plow horse, built out of oak. The ribs are oak, curved and pegged. You can see the grain running the length of everyone, and inside the ribs is iron. Chain and cam and a great slow drum in its belly, and shoulders that are just 2 enormous joints of blackened metal, and the whole animal is standing with its head slightly down, and its off forepaw lifted, as though it had been walking and someone had said its name. 60 years of weather have done what weather does, but somebody had been at it. The ivy was gone, you could see where, the stone was paler in the shape of it. There was new oak in the near hind leg, 4 ribs of it, pale as bread against all that black, and every peg in that leg was a different length, cut to fit, because the old ones had gone oval with age, and she had refused to re-drill 60-year-old sockets. A wright would understand what that leg cost. It is the difference between mending a thing and making a new thing with the old thing's face on it. There was a boy sitting on the plinth eating an apple, maybe 12, with grease on his hands, and he looked at me the way valley children look at strangers and said, "Copper ahead at the fair. It's not the fair." "Who mended it?" "Solvay," he said, like a man saying the son. "Old Solvay's been dead 19 years. "Solvay," he said again, more slowly because I was clearly simple, at the fulling mill, Down the road past the sluice, the one with the yard full of wheels. Don't touch anything in the yard. He went back to his apple. Then, because he could not help himself, 4 Wright said it was dead. She says it wasn't dead, nobody'd bothered to find out what it wanted. I stood there on a mill road with my hood up, and I could not speak for a moment. The fulling mill is an old, low, wet building with a yard, and the yard is full of wheels. Cart wheels, mill wheels, a chapel clock's whole escapement laid out on sacking in order, gates, hoists, a barrow with no legs. There is a system to it. It looks like chaos, and it is a system. And I knew the system, because I had lived inside it for 2 winters, and it had been the best 2 winters of my life. The doors were open. She was inside at a bench with her back to me, and her sleeves tied off, filing a cam. I stood in the doorway, and the light went dim behind me, across her bench, right across her hands. 2 winters ago she would have said, without looking, "Don't stand there." She did not say it. She moved. She picked up the cam and the file and shifted 6 inches down the bench into the light and went on filing, and did not turn round, and my heart went out of me like water out of a lock. "Merritt," I said. The file stopped. She set it down. She put both hands flat on the bench, and I watched her take a breath and put something away. The same movement I had seen on the 6th lock wall the first evening, when she decided something about me and filed it, and then she turned round. 4 years she was thinner. She had a burn on the back of one wrist, healed, the shiny kind you get from a chain running hot. Gray eyes doing the reading. What is this? What does it carry? Where will it fail? "Your Grace," she said. I would have preferred a slap. I have been struck by wolves twice my weight, and I would have preferred any of it to being called Your Grace by Merritt Solvay in a wet building at the top of the country. "Don't," I said. "It's your name." "It isn't, you know what it is." "I know what it was," she said. "You'll want to sit. There's a stool. Move the drum gear off it first and don't set it on the floor. The floor's got a slope." So I moved a drum gear and I sat on a stool in a fulling mill, and she made bad tea, and I understood that she was going to be perfectly, unbearably civil to me, and that I had earned every minute of it. She let the silence run. She was never afraid of one. I broke it because I have never been able to hold one in front of her. "I've been looking for you." "I know," she said. "That took the floor out from under me, you know. The proclamation came up the water in the 2nd summer." She stirred the pot. "The mill at the fork has it nailed up. 10 crowns for word of a wheelwright, gray eyes, Solvay, no pack, last seen at Greenock." She set the pot down. "Pell can read it. He asks me about it. I tell him it's about somebody else." 4 years, I said. My voice did something I did not authorize. "You knew for 2 of them." "Longer. The riders were through the valley before that. One of them sat where you're sitting." She looked at me for the first time without the reading, and there was nothing in her face I could use. "Casimir, you didn't lose me. You know where mill valleys are. You've a map room. I was 3 days up your own water, working under my own name on your own river for 4 years, and 40 families here have called me Solvay in the open air the whole time." "Then why didn't?" "Because being found," she said, "is not the same as being chosen. You'd have found a thing you'd mislaid. I've been mislaid before." And she poured the tea. I sat with that. "I am going to spare you the noises I wanted to make." I looked at my hands around the cup, because that is where I have always looked when I could not look anywhere else, and I saw them. They were still. Not a tremor, not a flicker. The tea flat as a coin. 4 years of grips and scribes and eating alone, and I had been in that room 11 minutes. She saw where I was looking. She saw what was in it. And she said very quietly the cruelest true thing anyone has ever said to me. "I know. You. Casimir." She sat down on the end of the bench. "I knew before you did. I knew the 2nd winter at the brazier, the night you told me about your father. You put your hand out to take the wrench and it was steady and you didn't notice, and I did, and I sat there and did the arithmetic, and I have never in 4 years told a living soul. She held my eyes. I never used it, not once. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I could have walked into your hall any night of those 2 winters and said, look at his hands, ask him why, and your counsel would have had to swallow me whole. I never did it, because I wanted you to say it, not your hands, you. Merit. And you had it, she said, every day for 2 years. Your own body telling you plainly in the only language it had. And you needed 400 people's permission to hear it. And when it came time, you didn't even need to be brave. I gave you a door. I asked you a question with a yes and a no in it, and there wasn't a man in that hall who could have made you say either one. You picked. I know what I picked. Then we've nothing to argue about, she said, and got up and went back to her cam. I stayed 4 days. She did not throw me out. That is the thing about her that people take for softness, and it is not softness. It is that she has never once in her life wasted energy on a gesture. Throwing a king out of your yard is a gesture. She simply worked and let me be in the room, and by the second morning I had my coat off and my sleeves up, because I could not sit still and because, God forgive me, I was happy. That is the shameful part of these 4 days. I was happy. I got under the hound with her on the second afternoon with the boy Pell working the little hand drum and a lamp on a chain, and the 2 of us spent 5 hours on the near hind shoulder where the chain was jumping a tooth. And I held the lamp, and then I held the chain, and then I was holding the whole shoulder joint up on my back while she pinned it. Exactly the way I had held a beam at 19, except that this time my hands did not shake and there was nobody dying, and she said, hold it, hold it. Hold it good, and dropped the pin in, and slid out from under the ribs with her hair full of rust, and laughed. I had not heard that in 4 years. I had to look away. And in between, I made every mistake a man can make. I offered her the Rights Guild. I said it lightly over the bench as though it were nothing. The charter of the Greenock Rights, hers, the lock warden's office under her, every gate in the kingdom answering to her hand. She said no. I offered to buy the fulling mill and give it to her outright, and the yard, and the water rights, and a lease on the race for 90 years. And she put down the file and looked at the ceiling for a moment the way you do when a child has done something you must not laugh at. I offered her money for the hound, a great deal of money. I offered to take it down the water and set it in my own square where the whole kingdom could see it, and she said, it's not mine. You rebuilt it. It's Cardinwell's. It was my grandfather's gift to them. They fed him for 30 years and he gave them a wolf that walks. She wiped her hands. You've got that backwards, which is the whole trouble with you. You think a gift is a thing you hand down. It's a thing you owe. And on the 3rd night, this is the one that still makes me put my head in my hands, I told her about Havrin. All of it. The hook, the roads, the closing, the 11 weeks, Ilse and her horse master and her fine ruthless nerve, the winter we nearly starved and the Moss Channel hoist. Your hoist. The drawing she left on my table on the worst night of my life, finished, owed to nobody. I told her Greenock ate that winter on her arithmetic and did not know it, and I actually said this out loud in the tone of a man laying down a winning card. You see, he'd have closed the roads regardless. The match was never going to save them. It was all for nothing. She was quiet a while. Then she said, do you know, I think that's the worst thing you've said to me. Merit. You want it to have been for something, she said. You want the ledger to come out. If the roads had stayed open, if the children had eaten because of it, then you traded me for a country, and that's a story a king can live in. Havrin's ruined that for you. Now you traded me for nothing and you can't bear it. She turned round on the bench. Casimir, I never once thought you loved Ilse Havrin. That's not the wound. I knew the whole time exactly what you were doing and why, and I'd have understood it, I'd have hated it, and I'd have understood it if you had stood up on that dais and said one hard sentence out loud in front of your own people. Any sentence. This costs me my mate and I'm paying it. You didn't. You let the steward read it and you looked at me and you said yes, because you would rather be wrong in private than right out loud, and that is not a thing that happened to you because of grain. That's just who you were. The fire did the work of talking for a while. Was, I said, you said were. I did, she said, and I have kept that word like a coin in a pocket ever since, and taken it out and looked at it and put it back. I asked her on the fourth morning, properly I thought. I had rehearsed it, which should have warned me. I stood in that yard full of wheels and I told her the truth about the 4 years, the 11 kitchens, the men who burned her name into a chest to sell me, the fact that I had not held a cup in 18 months, and I said, come back to Greenock. Come home with me. Be my Luna. Say yes. She listened to all of it, and she did not look away, and she did not enjoy any of it, and when I was done she said, no. I stood in a wet yard and could not breathe. You're not asking, she said. You're paying. Look at what you've brought me, a guild, a mill, a title, a hoist, 4 years of suffering laid out on the bench like a receipt. That's a settlement, Casimir. That's a man closing an account. You've come 3 days up the water in a farmer's coat with your hood up, to a valley where nobody knows your face, to ask me in an empty yard where it costs you exactly nothing. It costs you nothing, she said, and you know it because I watched you take the hood off at the sluice and put it back on again. She had seen it, of course she had seen it. There were 400 people in that hall, she said. Every one of them heard you send me out. Every one of them went back to their wine. Greenock doesn't know what it did because you never told it. Your council doesn't know what it took because you let them think it cost you nothing. What are you losing, they said, and you sat there and let them say it. Her voice never rose. It never has. You don't owe me a mill. You don't owe me a guild. Whatever you owe it to the room you set it in. The wheels went on turning all around that yard. 9 mills, 4 races, everything in Cardinwell moving except the 2 of us. And if I say it there, I said, in the hall in front of all of them. Then you'll have said it, she said. That's all. That's not a purchase either. I'm not a prize at the end of a hard errand, and if you go home and do it thinking you've earned me, don't come back. Then what is it for? It's for you, she said, and for that hall, and for the next wheelwoman who stands in it. Pell came round the corner with the drum gear then and stopped dead, the way children do when they walk into weather. She sent him to fetch the small file. He went walking backwards. I said, when does it walk? 6 weeks, summer fair. She picked up the cam and put it down again, and for one moment, the reading went out of her face and there was something under it that was 4 years old and had not healed either. Come back then, she said, if you're still coming. I rode out of Cardinwell at first light with my hood down, and every mile of those 3 days my hands got worse, and I did not care, because I had finally understood the shape of the thing. I had held a beam at 19 and said nothing, and my father died anyway. I had held my tongue at 30 and said 1 word and lost her anyway. My whole life I have been a man who thought that if he only bore it in silence, hard enough, alone, the roof would stay up. And now I was going to have to walk into my own hall, onto my own stone, in front of the same 400 wolves, with my steward and my aunt and Durin Haverin's letters still coming, and say the hard sentence out loud, 4 years too late, with nothing to gain by it, in front of every man who had ever counted my hands. I have gone under a locked gate for a dying man. I had rather have done it again. I did it on a Thursday, at the ordinary sitting, with the rain on the high windows and the hall about a third full, which I want on the record, because I had considered waiting for the midsummer court when there would be 1,000 of them and torches and a proper audience for my magnificent humility. That was the last cowardice I caught in myself in time. A man who waits for the right crowd is still choosing his crowd. So, a Thursday, the grain tallies, the eel rents, the dispute out of Hallow Quarter about a wall. My steward read the wall dispute and looked up and said, "That is the business, sire," and I stood. I do not stand at the Thursday sitting. Nobody stands at the Thursday sitting. 200 wolves stopped mid-yawn. I came down off the dais, which I had also never done, and I walked to the stone with my boot print in it, and I stood on it, and I put my hands where every soul in that hall could see them, out in front of me on the rail, shaking like a man in a fever. 11 years I had hidden them. My steward went the color of paper. Somebody near the doors said something and was hushed. 4 years ago, I said, on this stone I did the worst thing I have ever done, and every one of you was here and none of you know about it. That is my fault as well. I'm going to fix that now. You could hear the rain. Marit Salve of Cardinwell is my fated mate. She has been since the first winter she came up the water to mend the 6th lock, and I knew it and she knew it, and I never said it aloud once in 2 years. My hands have shaken since I was 19. Most of you have watched them. Some of you have counted on them. When she was in a room, they stopped. I turned my hands over on the rail so they could see the whole ugly performance of it. That is not poetry, my lords. That is a fact you can test. They stopped for 2 winters and they have not stopped since, and they will not stop today. And I am telling you this in the plainest words I have, because the last time I stood on this stone I chose to be silent, and it cost the woman I love 4 years of her life. Nobody moved. My aunt had her hand over her mouth. On the last night of Durin Havren's visit, I let a betrothal be read out in this hall while she stood at those doors in her working clothes with my own drawings under her arm because I had sent for them. She heard it here, with you, and then she came and stood where the steward's standing and asked me one question in front of all of you. She asked, "Do you want me to go?" She gave me a door with a yes and a no in it, and there was not a man alive who could have made me say either. And I said yes, one word. I did not even give her a sentence. I looked up the hall at them, and I made myself do it slowly, face by face. And you cheered, I said, not out of malice because you didn't know, and you didn't know because I made sure of it. Some of you told me kindly that the match cost me nothing. What are you losing, you said. I sat in that chair and let you say it, and I have blamed you for it privately for 4 years, and that is a lie I'm putting down today. You could not have known what it cost. I never told you. A king who hides the price and then resents the bill is not a wronged man. He is a coward with a good memory. The steward said, very quietly, "Sire," in the voice of a man trying to save his king from a cliff. "Sit down, Aldous," I said without heat. "I'm not finished, and you're not the one who has to be brave today." I told them the rest. The grain, the roads, Havren's hook, that he had never intended the wagon lines to stay open, that the match was the ribbon on a closing fist, that he had gambled on my vanity and won it in 11 days in my second-best chair. I told them that Greenock did not starve that winter because of any alliance of mine, but because a packless wheelwoman with no rank and no reason to love us drew the Moss Channel hoist and finished it and left it on my table, unpaid, on the night I sent her out of this hall. You ate that winter on her arithmetic, I said, and you did not know her name. That is what I built. A country that eats her bread and calls her the wheelwoman. Old Warden Bryce of the Sea Road stood up at the back, which took more nerve than anything I did that day, and said, "Sire, what is it you're asking us for?" "Nothing," I said. "That's the point. There's nothing to vote on. I'm not asking her to come. I've asked and she said no, and she was right too. I heard the hall take that in. Let them. I'm telling you because it happened here, and because there is not one of you who would have heard about it from me otherwise, and because the next time somebody stands at those doors in working clothes with nothing in their hand but a good drawing, I want every wolf in this room to remember what we did to the last one." Then I told my steward to strike the Havren letters from the docket, all of them, unanswered, and to send Durin Havren a single line under my seal, and I dictated it there in the open so they could all hear exactly what it said, because I had learned what a private word is worth. You close the roads, we do not use them, do not write again. And then, this is the part my council still argues about at dinner, and let them. I gave the Moss Channels away. Not to the Crown. Not to Greenock. I had the charter drawn that afternoon and read in that same hall before the rain stopped. The Moss Channel works, the hoist, the grain route, the whole apparatus that had saved us, vested in a trust of the 9 valleys that feed the water, Cardinwell first among them. In the name of Osric Salve, wheelwright, and his granddaughter in perpetuity, tolls at cost, the crown holding no vote. I gave away the throat of my own kingdom's bread to a committee of millers. The steward asked me that night, in a voice I had not heard from him in years, whether I understood what I had done. I said I did. He said, "It is a gift a king cannot take back." "That's what a gift is," I told him. "I had it backwards," someone explained. It was 6 weeks to the summer fair. They were the 6 longest weeks of my life, and I have counted 4 years. I did not write to her. I wanted to badly every night, and every night I understood the same thing. A letter would be another payment. Look what I did. Look what it cost. Now come. She would have read it in one breath, and I would have deserved the silence that came back. So I worked. I sat the sittings. I ate in hall in front of them with my hands badly dropping things, and the first week was an execution, and by the 3rd week nobody was watching anymore, and I discovered something that no one had told me in 11 years of hiding. A hall does not care about a man's hands. It cares whether he will say a true thing out loud. They had been counting my hands because I gave them nothing else to count. And the story went up the water without any help from me. It went the way things go on a river, through barge masters and lock keepers and the boy who empties the ash. By the 4th week, I had letters from 3 valleys and a delegation of millers who did not believe the charter and had come to look at the seal. And by the 5th week, my aunt told me, with an expression I could not read, that in the low quarter they had started calling the Moss Channel Hoist the Salve. I rode for Cardinwell on the morning of the fair with no crown, no escort, and my hood down. That last part is small, and it is not small. I went up that valley with my face showing, and every soul on the mill road knew me before I reached the sluice. Cardinwell at a fair is a thing to see. 40 families and 600 visitors, bunting between the mill gables, an ox on a spit, a fiddler, a man selling terrible pies, and every child in 6 valleys packed along the mill road behind a rope. And at the head of the road, on its plinth, the hound, oak ribs black with 60 years and 4 ribs of new pale wood in the near hind leg, its head slightly down, its off forepaw lifted, waiting 19 years for somebody to bother finding out what it wanted. She was under it, of course, feet sticking out, Pell on the drum. I did not go to her. I stood in the crowd with the pie sellers and the farmers and let it be her day, and at noon the sluice gate came up and the race took the drum, and the whole valley made a sound I will hear on my deathbed. The hound came off the plinth. I have no words for it that are worth anything. It is a wolf of wood and iron the size of a plow horse, and it walks, the great slow shoulders rolling, one paw down, then the next, and the chain inside going like a mill, and the head swinging a little with each step the way a real wolf's does, because 60 years ago a madman sat and watched wolves until he understood the arithmetic of it. It came down the mill road end to end at the pace of an old man walking, and 600 people screamed, and children went under the rope and were hauled back by their collars, and the fiddler stopped playing and just stood there with his bow in the air. And at the far end it stopped, and set its lifted paw down at last, after 19 years, and the whole valley went quiet, and then the noise came in like weather. She stood back from it with a rag in her hands and let them have it. She did not take a bow. Somebody put a crown of leaves on Pell instead, and he wore it for 3 days. It walked twice more that afternoon, copper ahead. She made 19 crowns and gave the whole of it to the fulling mill's roof. I found her at dusk, sitting on the plinth's edge with her boots swinging in the last of the light, with the crowd gone down the road to the ox and the fiddler starting up again. I did not sit. I stood in front of her with my hands at my sides where she could see them shaking. I said it, I told her, in the hall on the stone. Thursday sitting, 200 of them, rain on the windows. I told them what you were to me, and what I did, and that they cheered, and that I made sure they never knew, and that they ate that winter on your arithmetic and called you the wheel woman. I know, she said. It's been up the water a fortnight, barge masters, a flicker of something. You gave away the moss channels to the valleys, in your grandfather's name. I know that too. She looked out at the road. Pell can read, he's insufferable now. I didn't come to be paid for it, I said. You said if I came thinking I'd earned you not to come. I haven't earned you. There's no ledger where that comes out. I did it because you were right. I owed it to the room I set it in, not to you, and it's done. And it doesn't buy me a thing, and I'd do it again on a Thursday with 200 people and no fiddle. Then why are you here? Because I want to ask you, I said, and this time I'm asking, not offering. There's no guild in it. There's no mill. There's no title unless you want one, and if you don't want one, Greenock will simply have to manage without a Luna, and it has managed for 15 years. My voice went, I let it. Merritt, I'm not asking you to come home. I'm asking if I can come here. Whenever I can be spared, and I can be spared more than my steward believes. I'll sleep in the yard. I'll hold the lamp. I'll hold the chain. I'm asking whether there's any version of the rest of my life that has you in it, and you may take as long as you like. And if the answer is no, I'll go down the water in the morning and I will never send another rider, and the proclamation comes off the mill at the fork tomorrow either way, because I should have taken it down 4 years ago and I'm sorry. That's all of it. That's everything I've got. The fiddle went on down the road. She sat on that plinth swinging her boots for what I am fairly sure was 11 seconds, and was certainly the whole of a life. Then she said, "Your hands." I looked down. They were still, flat steady, both of them hanging at my sides, quiet as stone, and I had been standing in front of her for 4 minutes and had not noticed, because, for the first time since I was 19, I had not been thinking about my hands at all. "They've been doing that since you came round the sluice," she said. "I watched them do it from up here." And she looked at me, and the reading was gone out of her face entirely, and what was under it was 4 years old and had not healed either. "Casimir, sit down. You're making the boy nervous." I sat down on the plinth of the wheelwright's hound next to Merritt Solvay, and she did not take my hand, and I did not take hers, and we sat there while the light went, and the fiddler got worse and the ox burned. After a long while she said, "I'm not coming down the water. Not this year." "All right. There's the chapel escapement, and the hound wants the whole off for doing before next spring, and I've 11 wheels in that yard belonging to people who fed me when I came up here with nothing but a chest and my grandfather's name. That's a debt. You know about those now, apparently. A breath. And I'm not going to be a thing you fixed. I've been mislaid once. I'd rather be nothing than be somebody's mending." "All right," I said. "You'll be in the yard," she said, "in the way." "Holding the lamp badly." "Yes. And when I do come down the water, I'll come up that hall in my working clothes in the front doors, and nobody takes my elbow." "Nobody takes your elbow," I said. "And if a man tries, Merritt, I'll have him out of Greenock before he's got the sentence finished, and I'll say why out loud on a Thursday." And she laughed that same laugh, with her hair full of rust, that I had heard once under a wolf's ribs and had had to look away from, and she said, "God help your steward." That was 3 years ago. I do not intend to tell you how the rest went, because it is ours, and because I have noticed that men who tell you the whole of a love have usually stopped having it. I will tell you 2 things, and then I am done. The first is that Greenock has a Luna, and she came down the water in her own time, in the 4th spring, in her working clothes, in the front doors, with a tool chest and no escort, and nobody took her elbow. She spends 5 months of the year in Cardinwell, and I have stopped apologizing to my counsel about it. There is a stool by my chair at the Thursday sitting, and half the time there is a drum gear on it, and I have to move it myself. Every gate in this kingdom is seated true. When she is in the hall, my hands are still, and when she is up the water they shake, and I no longer hide them, because the whole country knows now what my hands are for, and there is not a wolf in Greenock who would think to count them. The second is smaller, and it is the one I actually wanted to tell you. There is an evening at the end of every fair day in Cardinwell. The crowd goes down to the ox. The hound stands at the far end of the mill road with its paw down at last, and she sits on the plinth with the day's work spread out on a rag beside her and puts her grandfather's tools away, one at a time, wiped in the order he kept them, into the chest with SOLVAY burned in the lid by his own hand and not by any liars for 40 crowns. The small file, the pin punch. The oval socket drift he cut himself in the year she was born. She does it slowly. She has never once let me do it for her, and she has never once minded me watching. And I sit on a stone plinth beside her in a farmer's coat with the light going and the fiddle starting, holding the lamp badly, and my hands do not move at all.